I showed up to my wife's law firm opening party only to see everyone laughing and pointing. Testron husband is here. Then my wife handed me an envelope. The first job of my firm is our divorce, sign, and leave. So I walked away, quietly canceled every payment, party, trip, and pulled out my $20 million investment to her firm. Minutes later, my phone lit up with 456 missed calls, and someone showed up at my door. You know what they say about karma? Sometimes she's a patient bitch who takes her sweet time. But tonight, as I'm walking into the Hilton atrium wearing my best Tom Ford suit and a smile that could sell ice to Eskimos, I have no clue that karma's about to clock in for overtime. The place is absolutely buzzing. Crystal chandeliers casting rainbow prisms across marble floors that probably cost more than most people's cars. I can smell success in the air, mixed with overpriced champagne, and that particular brand of arrogance that only comes from lawyers who think they've made it big. The irony? Every damn penny of this extravaganza came from my bank account. I'm Marcus Hale, 42 years old, and I've got that self-made swagger that comes from turning a small tech startup into a multi-million-dollar empire while everyone else was still figuring out how to use email without accidentally hitting reply all. Tonight's supposed to be the grand opening of Hale and Winters LLP, my wife's dream law firm that I've been bankrolling like some kind of legal sugar daddy. As I make my way through the crowd, nodding at faces I recognize from country club dinners and charity galas, I'm actually feeling pretty damn good about myself. This is my moment too, right? I mean, without Marcus Hale's deep pockets, there wouldn't be any Hale and Winters LLP. There wouldn't be this fancy party with its ice sculptures and champagne fountains that look like they belong in a Vegas hotel lobby. But then I hear it, this snide little comment that cuts through the party chatter like a knife through butter. Some young associate, probably fresh out of law school and still wet behind the ears, leans over to his buddy and says with a smirk, well, looks like the test run husband is here. Test run husband. The words hit me like a slap across the face, but I keep walking, keep smiling, because that's what you do when you're Marcus Hale. You don't let some nobody in a cheap suit see you sweat. But inside, something cold and sharp is starting to twist in my gut. I scan the room looking for Clara. And there she is, my wife of 8 years, standing at the podium like she owns the world. And damn it, she looks absolutely stunning. Her dark hair is pulled back in this perfect chignon that probably took her stylist 2 hours to achieve, and she's wearing that diamond necklace I bought her for our anniversary last year. The one that cost more than most people make in a decade. She's glowing under those chandelier lights, fielding congratulations and air kisses from everyone who matters in the New York legal scene. Judge Robert Winters, her father and one of the most powerful men in the city's judicial system, is beaming with pride from his front row seat. Victor Cross, her business partner and the guy I've been writing checks to for the past 2 years, is standing just off to the side, looking smug as hell in his custom-tailored Armani. Clara catches my eye and smiles, but something's off. It's not the warm, genuine smile I fell in love with all those years ago. This one's different, calculated, like she's already rehearsed what comes next. She taps her champagne glass with a silver spoon, and the room falls silent. Every face turns toward the podium. Every conversation stops mid-sentence. You could hear a pin drop in this place, which is saying something considering we're in the middle of Manhattan. Ladies and gentlemen, Clara begins, her voice carrying that smooth, confident tone she uses in court. Thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate the launch of Hale and Winters LLP. This firm represents everything I've worked for, everything I've dreamed of since I was a little girl sitting in my father's courtroom. The crowd murmurs appreciatively. Someone shouts, "Here, here," and raises their glass. But then Clara does something that makes my blood run cold. She reaches into her clutch, the same Chanel bag I bought her for Christmas, and pulls out a manila envelope. Plain, unremarkable, the kind of envelope that could contain anything from tax documents to grocery coupons. However, she continues, and I swear the temperature in the room drops about 10 degrees. Before we officially open our doors to serve justice in this city, I have one piece of business to attend to. She walks down from the podium, her heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown timer. Every step brings her closer to where I'm standing, and every step makes that cold feeling in my stomach spread a little further. The crowd parts like the Red Sea as she approaches. I can feel hundreds of eyes on me, can hear the whispers starting to buzz around the room like angry wasps. Someone's phone camera flashes, then another. Clara stops right in front of me, close enough that I can smell her perfume. The same Chanel No. 5 she's worn since our second date. She's still smiling, but now I can see what that smile really is. It's not love or gratitude or even basic human decency. It's pity mixed with something that looks disturbingly like satisfaction. "Marcus," she says, loud enough for the whole room to hear. "You've been so generous, so supportive. And I want everyone here to know that the first case Hale and Winters LLP will be handling is very close to my heart." She hands me the envelope like she's presenting me with an award at some twisted ceremony. The paper feels heavy in my hands, weighted with possibilities I don't want to consider. "The first case for my law firm," she announces, turning back to address the crowd with that same practiced smile, "is my divorce. Marcus, I need you to sign these papers and leave. Tonight." The words hang in the air like smoke from a gun barrel. For a moment, everything is perfectly silent. Then the applause starts, scattered at first, then growing louder. Some people are gasping, covering their mouths with their hands like they're watching a car crash in slow motion. Others are filming with their phones, probably already uploading to social media with hashtags like #LawyerLife and #PowerMove. I stand there holding that envelope, feeling like the biggest fool who ever walked the earth. This is my money funding this party. These are my connections filling this room. I'm the one who made this entire night possible, and now I'm being dismissed like some kind of hired help who's overstayed his welcome. The humiliation should be crushing. The betrayal should bring me to my knees. 8 years of marriage, 2 years of supporting her dream firm, $20 million of my own money, all of it reduced to a manila envelope, and a public execution in front of everyone who matters in New York's legal community. But you know what? I don't shout. I don't throw the envelope back in her face. I don't cause the scene that everyone's probably expecting, the dramatic meltdown that would give them something to gossip about at their country club brunches for the next 6 months. Instead, I do something that probably surprises everyone in that room, maybe even myself. I fold that envelope in half, slide it into my jacket pocket, and walk toward the exit with my head held high. As I push through the crowd, I can hear the whispers starting up again, can feel their eyes following my every move. But I keep walking, past the ice sculptures and champagne fountains, past the marble floors and crystal chandeliers, past everything I paid for but apparently never owned. Outside, the New York night air hits my face like a blessing. I loosen my tie, let the cool breeze wash away the stuffiness of that overpriced hotel ballroom. And then, standing there on the sidewalk with the city lights reflecting off the wet pavement, I do something that would probably shock everyone still inside celebrating my public humiliation. I smile. Not the fake, practiced smile I've been wearing all evening, but a real one. Faint, but genuine. See, here's the thing about being Marcus Hale that none of those people in that room understand. I didn't get where I am by being stupid. I didn't build a multi-million-dollar empire by trusting people at their word. And I sure as hell didn't survive in the cutthroat world of business by not having a few contingency plans up my sleeve. They think they've won. They think this is the end of the story. The foolish husband who got played by his ambitious wife and her slick business partner. They think Marcus Hale just got taken for the ride of his life. They haven't seen anything yet. The real game? It's just getting started. You know what's funny about betrayal? It's like food poisoning. At first, you're just confused and uncomfortable, but then it hits you all at once, and suddenly you're seeing everything with crystal clarity. By the time I get back to my apartment on the Upper East Side, that clarity is burning through me like acid. I pour myself 3 fingers of Macallan 25, the good stuff I save for special occasions, though I'm pretty sure getting publicly divorced at your wife's law firm launch party qualifies as special in the most twisted way possible. The amber liquid burns going down, but it's nothing compared to the fire that's been building in my chest since I walked out of that circus. My apartment feels different now. Quieter. All those little touches that screamed successful married couple. The matching throw pillows Clara insisted on. The wedding photos in their expensive frames. The abstract art she picked out because it was investment pieces. Now they just look like props from a play I didn't know I was starring in. But I'm not here for a pity party. I've got work to do. I head straight to my study, past the floor-to-ceiling windows that offer a million-dollar view of Central Park. Most people think the view is what makes this room special, but they'd be wrong. The real magic is behind the custom-built bookshelf, where a hidden panel slides away to reveal my private safe. This isn't some dinky hotel room safe where you stash your passport and a few $100. This is a proper vault, fireproof, waterproof, and big enough to hold everything that really matters. I punch in the code, and the heavy door swings open with a satisfying click. Inside, organized with the kind of obsessive precision that would make a Swiss banker weep with joy, are my primary assets. Not stocks or bonds or crypto wallets. Those are for amateurs. No, these are the documents that separate the players from the played, the hunters from the hunted. I pull out the first binder, thick as a phone book and labeled in my own handwriting. Hale and Winters LLP. Financial structure. Every page tells a story, and boy, is it a doozy. Here's what Clara and her smug partner Victor didn't understand about Marcus Hale. I don't just throw money at things and hope for the best. When I invest, I document everything. When I write a check, I create a paper trail that could be followed by a blind accountant with dyslexia. The first section shows the initial seed money, $5 million transferred from my personal account to establish the firm's operating capital. Clara thought it was a gift, a loving husband supporting his wife's dreams. In reality, it was a loan with very specific terms that she never bothered to read because she was too busy picking out office furniture and planning launch parties. Next up, the office lease. That gorgeous corner suite on Madison Avenue with the mahogany conference table and the view of the Chrysler Building? The one that costs $40,000 a month? Yeah, that's in my name. The lease agreement sits right here in black and white, along with the security deposit receipt for $200,000. I flip through more pages, each one a little insurance policy I never thought I'd need to cash in. Interior design costs, another $250,000 for Clara's vision of sophisticated legal elegance. The custom law library with its first edition legal texts and hand-carved shelving, 6 figures. The state-of-the-art computer system and case management software, another $100,000. But the real kicker is the recruitment expenses. Clara and Victor went on a hiring spree like they were building the legal equivalent of the Yankees. They poached senior associates from white shoe firms, offering signing bonuses and inflated salaries that would make Wall Street executives jealous. Every single one of those offers was backed by my money, and every single contract includes a clause that ties their employment to the firm's financial stability. As I'm going through these documents, something starts bubbling up from deep in my chest. At first, I think it might be another wave of humiliation, but then I realize what it actually is: laughter. Dark, bitter laughter that tastes like revenge served at room temperature. Because here's the thing that's becoming crystal clear as I review my meticulous record keeping. I haven't been Clara's husband for the past 2 years. I've been her bank. A walking, talking ATM with a wedding ring and a joint checking account. Every dinner party where she introduced me as my husband, the tech entrepreneur, she was really saying, my financier who doesn't understand law. Every time she asked my opinion on hiring decisions or office locations, she was just being polite while spending my money. Every passionate speech about building something meaningful and lasting, she was talking about building it on my dime while planning to cut me out of the picture. I pull out my laptop and start cross-referencing the documents with my bank statements. The pattern is so obvious now that I can't believe I missed it. Every major expense for the firm coincided with Clara working late nights, taking client dinners that always seemed to include Victor, and coming home with that glow that I stupidly thought was professional satisfaction. $20 million. That's what the grand total comes to when you add up every check, every wire transfer, every credit card payment I've made to support Hale and Winters LLP. $20 million to fund my wife's affair and finance my own public humiliation. But here's where Clara and Victor made their fatal mistake. They assumed I was just another rich guy who got successful by luck and stayed successful by throwing money at problems. They thought I was the kind of Mark who signs papers without reading them and trusts people because it's easier than being suspicious. They clearly never did their homework on how Marcus Hale actually operates. Every single one of these transactions was structured as a business investment, not a marital gift. Every contract includes performance clauses, accountability measures, and most importantly, exit strategies. Clara never read the fine print because she was too busy planning her grand debut as New York's hottest new legal power couple. I closed the binder and reached for the next one. Corporate structure and silent partner agreements. This is where things get really interesting. See, when you're putting $20 million into a startup law firm, even one run by your loving wife, you don't just write checks and hope for the best. You create legal structures that protect your investment. You establish yourself as a silent partner with very specific rights and responsibilities. Rights like the ability to freeze corporate accounts if fiscal responsibility is questioned. Rights like mandatory disclosure of all major expenditures. Rights like unilateral withdrawal of invested capital under breach of fiduciary duty clauses. The beauty of it all is that Clara signed every single one of these agreements herself. She was so eager to get her hands on my money that she barely glanced at the corporate documents. She probably assumed they were just legal boilerplate, the kind of paperwork you sign when your husband is being overly cautious about protecting his assets. I lean back in my chair and take another sip of that Macallan, savoring both the whiskey and the irony. At this very moment, Clara and Victor are probably still at the Hilton, basking in the afterglow of their power move, accepting congratulations from all those legal eagles who witnessed my public takedown. They think they've won. They think Marcus Hale just got played by the two smartest people in the room. They're probably already planning how to spend my $20 million, maybe even joking about how easy it was to separate a fool from his money. What they don't realize is that Marcus Hale doesn't get played. He plays the game better than everyone else. And sometimes that means letting people think they're winning right up until the moment they realize they've been checkmated. I close the safe and pour myself another drink. Tomorrow, the real education begins. Tonight, I'm just a guy in an expensive apartment, surrounded by evidence of the biggest mistake his wife ever made. But hey, we all make mistakes. The trick is making sure yours aren't fatal. You know what separates successful people from everyone else? Timing. Not just knowing what to do, but knowing exactly when to do it. And as I'm sitting in my study at 2:47 a.m., nursing my third glass of Macallan and staring at my laptop screen, I realize that my timing has never been better. The city outside my windows is mostly asleep, but I'm wide awake with the kind of clarity that only comes from having your world turned upside down and finally seeing it right side up. Clara and Victor are probably passed out in some five-star hotel suite right now, drunk on champagne and their own perceived brilliance. They think they've pulled off the heist of the century, stealing $20 million and a law firm from Marcus Hale while making him look like a fool in front of half of New York's legal establishment. What they don't know is that Marcus Hale doesn't sleep when there's work to be done. And tonight, there's definitely work to be done. I crack my knuckles and open up my laptop, the screen's blue glow reflecting off the empty whiskey glass beside me. First stop, the firm's online banking portal. Clara probably assumes I don't have access anymore, maybe even changed the passwords in some amateur attempt at digital security. She always was too trusting, too willing to believe that people are exactly what they appear to be on the surface. But here's the thing about being the guy who bankrolled the entire operation. You make sure you always have a way in. Those credentials I memorized when we first set up the corporate accounts? Still working perfectly. The backup email address tied to password recovery? That's my personal Gmail account, not Clara's. The security questions? All answered with information only I would know. I'm in the system within 30 seconds, and what I see makes me smile for the first time since that disaster at the Hilton. The account balance shows exactly what I expected. $847,000 in operating capital, sitting pretty in the main business checking account. There's also the money market account with another $1.2 million in reserve funds, and the expense account Victor's been using to fund his and Clara's business dinners at the city's most expensive restaurants. This is going to be fun. I start with the smallest moves first, the kind of financial adjustments that won't trigger any immediate red flags, but will definitely cause some interesting conversations come Monday morning. The automatic payment system that handles the firm's monthly expenses, office lease, utilities, cleaning service, coffee suppliers, gets a little adjustment. Not canceled, mind you, just temporarily suspended due to account verification requirements. Next up, the vendor payments. That fancy catering company that provided tonight's champagne fountain and caviar service? Their invoice payment just got frozen pending financial review. The florist who created those elaborate centerpieces? Same deal. The sound system rental, the photographer, the valet service. Every single vendor who contributed to my public humiliation just got moved to payment pending status. But I'm just getting warmed up. The real masterpiece is the payroll system. All those hotshot lawyers Clara and Victor poached from competing firms, the ones with their signing bonuses and six-figure salaries and attitudes that could cut glass, their direct deposit information just encountered a small technical glitch that will require manual resolution. Nothing permanent, you understand. Just a temporary hiccup that might make their mortgage payments a little more interesting this month. I lean back in my chair and take another sip of whiskey, savoring the smooth burn as much as the elegant simplicity of what I'm doing. This isn't some dramatic corporate raid with hostile takeovers and screaming board meetings. This is surgical precision, the kind of quiet destruction that happens in spreadsheets and database queries while the targets sleep peacefully in their beds. But the real coup de grace is still coming. I navigate to the investment management section of the portal, where the crown jewel of my financial architecture sits waiting. My silent partner withdrawal clause. It's buried in subsection 7.3 of the corporate partnership agreement, the part that Clara's lawyer probably skimmed over because it looked like standard boilerplate language. What it actually says, in very precise legal terminology, is that any partner who contributed more than 75% of the firm's initial capitalization has the right to immediate asset recovery in the event of material breach of fiduciary responsibility or dissolution of partnership confidence. $20 million in, Clara's public divorce announcement at the firm's launch party. Victor's smirk as he watched me get handed those papers. I'd say that qualifies as material breach of just about everything. I click through the withdrawal process, each screen asking me to confirm that yes, I really want to do this, and yes, I understand the consequences, and yes, I'm absolutely certain. The system is designed to make you think twice, to give you multiple opportunities to back down from what it knows is going to be a financial nuclear option. But Marcus Hale doesn't back down. Not when he's been played. Not when he's been humiliated. And definitely not when he's got 20 million reasons to make his point crystal clear. The final screen is beautiful in its simplicity. Withdrawal request submitted. Funds will be transferred within 24 to 48 business hours, pending final documentation review. Below that, a number that makes my heart skip a beat, $20 million. $20 million, about to disappear from Hale and Winters LLP's accounts like morning mist in the summer sun. I hit submit and lean back to watch the digital wheels start turning. Somewhere in the depths of the banking system's servers, electronic signals are already starting to flow, beginning the process that will transform Clara's dream firm from a powerhouse startup into a very expensive pile of legal documents. The beauty of it all is the timing. It's Saturday night, or Sunday morning, technically. The banks won't start processing anything until Monday, which means Clara and Victor have roughly 40 hours to enjoy their victory before they discover what Marcus Hale's version of a divorce settlement actually looks like. I pour myself one more glass of that Macallan and walk over to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. The city spreads out below me like a circuit board, all glittering lights and hidden connections. Somewhere out there, Clara is probably sleeping the sleep of the victorious, dreaming about her new life as New York's hottest legal celebrity. What she doesn't know yet is that you can't build a legal empire on someone else's money and then expect them to just walk away when you're done with them. You can't humiliate Marcus Hale in front of half the city's power brokers and assume there won't be consequences. They wanted a scene at that party, some dramatic breakdown they could gossip about over their country club brunches. What they're getting instead is something much more devastating. A silent storm that's going to tear through their perfect little world like a Category 5 hurricane. The best part? They'll never see it coming until it's already too late. I raise my glass to the sleeping city and smile. Monday morning is going to be very, very interesting. Monday morning hits New York City like a freight train, and I'm sitting in my kitchen sipping Colombian coffee that costs more per pound than most people spend on groceries, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. It's shaping up to be a beautiful day, the kind that makes you grateful to be alive and absolutely thrilled to be Marcus Hale. My phone has been buzzing since about 6:30 a.m., lighting up like a Christmas tree with incoming calls, texts, and voicemails. The caller ID reads like a who's who of people who suddenly need to talk to me very, very urgently. Clara, 47 missed calls and counting. Victor Cross, 12 calls, each one probably more desperate than the last. And a parade of board members, investors, and vendors whose names I recognize from the very expensive party they threw on Saturday night. I ignore every single one of them. There's something deeply satisfying about having information that other people desperately need while maintaining complete radio silence. It's like being the only person with an umbrella in a thunderstorm. You can choose who stays dry and who gets soaked to the bone. My doorman's voice crackles through the intercom at exactly 10 a.m., right on schedule. Mr. Hale, sir. There's a young lady here from the law firm. Says it's urgent. Name's Sophie something. Sophie Lang. Clara's assistant, fresh out of college and probably making 30 grand a year to fetch coffee and manage calendars for people who think they're changing the world. Poor kid probably has no idea she's about to become a messenger in the most expensive game of chess New York has seen all year. Send her up, Frank, I tell the intercom, then settle back into my leather chair with my coffee mug and the morning edition of the Wall Street Journal. Nothing quite like reading about other people's financial disasters while orchestrating your own masterpiece. The knock on my door comes exactly 3 minutes later. Soft, hesitant, the kind of knock that says, please don't shoot the messenger. I take my time answering, letting her stew in the hallway for a moment while I finish the article I'm reading about market volatility in emerging tech sectors. When I finally open the door, Sophie Lang looks like she's been through a blender set on Corporate Nightmare. Her usually perfect blonde hair is pulled back in a messy bun. Her makeup is smudged like she's been crying or rubbing her eyes, and she's clutching a manila folder against her chest like it's a life preserver. Mr. Hale, she says, and her voice actually cracks a little. Thank you for seeing me. I know this is irregular. Sophie, right. I step aside and gesture for her to come in. Clara's assistant? Coffee. You look like you could use it. She shakes her head quickly, too wound up to sit still. I can't stay long. The firm there's a situation. A big situation. I pour myself a fresh cup and lean against the kitchen counter, watching her with the kind of mild interest you'd show to a particularly entertaining street performer. Oh, what kind of situation? Everything's collapsing. The words tumble out of her like water through a broken dam. The payroll system crashed this morning. Nobody got paid. The vendors are calling nonstop saying their payments were rejected. The catering company is threatening to sue over the party expenses. Even the coffee service got cut off. Do you know how lawyers function without coffee, Mr. Hale? I take a slow sip from my mug and make a thoughtful noise. Sounds complicated. The investors are furious, she continues, pacing back and forth in my entryway like a caged animal. Judge Winters has been calling every hour demanding explanations. Victor locked himself in his office and won't come out. And Clara. She stops pacing and looks at me with eyes that are definitely on the verge of tears. Clara says it's all just a computer glitch. Some kind of banking error that will be resolved by end of business today. And what do you think, Sophie? She bites her lower lip, clearly wrestling with whether to speak her mind to the man who just got publicly divorced by her boss. I think, she says carefully, that computer glitches don't usually involve $20 million disappearing from corporate accounts. Smart girl. Smarter than her boss, anyway. I'm not a financial expert, I tell her, setting down my coffee mug and walking over to my desk. But that does sound like more than a glitch. I pull open the top drawer and retrieve a cream-colored envelope, the kind of expensive stationery that screams serious business without having to say a word. Inside are 3 sheets of legal paper covered in my lawyer's precise handwriting. Terms and conditions that Clara is going to absolutely hate, but will have no choice but to consider. I need you to deliver this to Clara, I say, handing Sophie the envelope. Directly to her. Don't give it to Victor, don't leave it with the receptionist, don't put it in her inbox. Hand it to Clara personally and tell her she has exactly 24 hours to respond. Sophie takes the envelope like it might explode in her hands. What's in it? A way out of this mess, I say simply. The only way out, actually. Her eyes search my face, probably looking for some hint of mercy or compassion or basic human decency. What she finds instead is the cold, calculating stare of a man who's done playing games. Mr. Hale, she says quietly, is this about the divorce? Because if it is, maybe we could. Sophie, I interrupt her gently but firmly. This isn't about the divorce. This is about business. $20 million worth of business that your bosses seem to have forgotten belongs to someone. She nods slowly, finally understanding that she's not just delivering a message. She's carrying the terms of surrender from the winning side to the losing side. 24 hours, I repeat. Not a minute more. And Sophie? Make sure Clara understands that this is the only offer she's going to get. The next conversation won't be nearly as pleasant. After she leaves, I walk back to my kitchen window and look out at the city below. Somewhere in a glass tower on Madison Avenue, Clara is probably having the worst Monday of her professional life. The phone calls, the panicked meetings, the growing realization that her dream firm is turning into a nightmare faster than she can damage control. I pour myself another cup of coffee and check my phone. 53 missed calls now, plus a text message from Victor that just says, "Call me now," in all caps. I delete the text without reading it twice and turn my phone to silent mode. The beautiful thing about being Marcus Hale is that when you hold all the cards, you get to decide when the game ends. And this game? It's just getting started. 24 hours, Clara. The clock is ticking. Friday morning arrives with all the subtlety of a demolition crew, and I'm standing in front of my bathroom mirror at 7:30 a.m., adjusting a tie that costs more than most people's rent, while mentally preparing for what's about to be the most satisfying business meeting of my entire career. Today's ensemble is what I like to call corporate executioner chic. Charcoal Tom Ford suit that fits like it was sewn directly onto my body, Italian leather shoes that could probably finance a small car, and a smile that would make a shark jealous. When you're about to walk into a room full of lawyers who think they've been playing chess while you've been playing 4D chess, presentation matters. The ride to Hale and Winters LLP takes exactly 14 minutes in Manhattan traffic, which gives me just enough time to review my notes and savor the irony of walking into a building whose lease I personally guarantee. The lobby looks the same as it did when Clara first showed me the space 2 years ago, all marble and brass and aspirational grandeur designed to intimidate clients into paying premium rates. What's different is the energy. Instead of the confident buzz of legal eagles circling their prey, there's a nervous tension in the air that you could cut with a subpoena. The receptionist, a young woman whose name I've never bothered to learn, looks up at me with eyes wide enough to suggest she knows exactly why I'm here. "Mr. Hale," she stammers. They're waiting for you in the conference room." Of course they are. When Marcus Hale schedules a 9 a.m. meeting, smart people show up early and nervous people show up earlier. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor gives me 30 seconds to appreciate the view of Manhattan spreading out below like a game board I'm about to rearrange. When the doors open, I can hear voices through the conference room's glass walls, urgent whispers, and what sounds like someone practicing damage control talking points. I push through the mahogany doors at exactly 9:00 a.m. because punctuality is just another form of power, and survey the carnage that used to be Clara's dream team. The conference room that once hosted champagne toasts and victory celebrations now looks like a war room staffed by people who've already lost the war. Elaine Porter, the senior counsel who Clara poached from a white shoe firm with promises of partnership and prestige, is sitting at the far end of the table staring at her coffee cup like it might contain answers to questions she's afraid to ask. Two junior associates, whose names I've never bothered to learn, are huddled together near the window, probably calculating how quickly they can update their LinkedIn profiles and start sending out resumes. The firm's accountant, a nervous little man who always looks like he's apologizing for existing, has spreadsheets spread out in front of him like tea leaves he's trying to read for signs of financial salvation. And then there's Clara, sitting at the head of the table in the same chair where she used to hold court during partners' meetings, looking like she hasn't slept since our conversation 3 nights ago. Her usually perfect appearance has been replaced by the kind of frazzled desperation that comes from trying to hold together something that's determined to fall apart. But the most telling detail in the entire room is the empty chair where Victor Cross should be sitting. "Where's your partner?" I ask, settling into the seat directly across from Clara with the kind of casual confidence that says I belong here more than anyone else in the room. "Victor is indisposed," Clara says carefully. "He's been dealing with some personal issues since Monday." Personal issues. That's a polite way of saying Nervous breakdown brought on by the sudden realization that he's been screwing around with someone else's wife while spending someone else's money. Word around the legal community is that Victor hasn't left his apartment since Tuesday, surviving on Chinese takeout and what I imagine is a steady diet of panic attacks. Well, I say, opening my briefcase and pulling out a folder thick enough to choke a horse. I suppose we'll have to proceed without him. I spread the documents across the mahogany table like a dealer shuffling cards, each page representing another nail in the coffin of Clara's legal empire. Partnership dissolution agreements, asset recovery forms, employment termination notices, and the piece de resistance, a restructuring proposal that would make Gordon Gekko weep with appreciation. As you all know, I begin, addressing the room with the kind of calm authority that comes from holding all the cards. Hale & Winters LLP is currently experiencing what we might charitably call a cash flow problem. Elaine Porter finally looks up from her coffee cup. Mr. Hale, if this is about the withdrawal of your investment, I'm sure we can work out some kind of payment plan. This isn't about payment plans, Elaine. This is about fundamental restructuring. I slide a copy of my terms across the table to each person in the room. These are my conditions for continued operation of this firm. The silence that follows is the kind you get in emergency rooms right before doctors deliver bad news. Everyone's reading, but nobody's speaking, probably because they're all trying to process the magnitude of what they're looking at. You want Clara to resign as managing partner? Elaine's voice comes out as barely more than a whisper. I want Clara to resign from any operational role in this firm. I correct. She can maintain a position as counsel, but she will have no decision-making authority, no client contact, and no access to firm finances. And Victor? Asks one of the junior associates. Victor Cross is terminated immediately, with no severance, no references, and a non-compete clause that will keep him from practicing law in New York for the next 5 years. Clara finally speaks up, her voice hollow. Marcus, you're destroying everything we built. Everything I built. I correct her gently. While you were playing law firm, I was actually running a business. The business that kept this place afloat for 2 years while you and Victor were playing house with my money. I stand up and walk to the window, looking out at the city that Clara once thought she was going to conquer. My $20 million will be repaid in structured installments over the next 10 years, with interest. I will assume 2 permanent board seats, including the position of Financial Oversight Director with veto power over any expenditure exceeding $10,000. That's essentially a hostile takeover, Elaine stammers. No, I turn back to face the room, and for the first time since this whole thing started, I let them see exactly how much I've enjoyed watching their little empire crumble. A hostile takeover is when someone steals your company. This is what happens when you bite the hand that feeds you and discover it has very sharp teeth. Clara's hands are shaking as she picks up the pen I've placed in front of her. If I sign this, I'll be nothing more than an employee in my own firm. Your firm? I walk back to the table and lean down so that my face is level with hers. Clara, this stopped being your firm the moment you decided to serve me divorce papers at a party I paid for. What you're looking at now is the Marcus Hale version of a settlement offer. She stares at the signature line for what feels like an eternity, probably running through all the alternatives in her mind. Fight me in court with lawyers she can't afford? Try to start over somewhere else with a reputation that's been nuked from orbit? Declare bankruptcy and watch 20 years of legal career go down the drain? When she finally signs her name, the pen scratches across the paper like fingernails on a chalkboard. One by one, the other partners sign their copies, each signature another step in what history will probably remember as the most efficient corporate coup in Manhattan legal history. As I'm packing up my briefcase, Elaine Porter clears her throat. Mr. Hale, what happens to the rest of us? You keep your jobs, I say simply. You keep your salaries. You keep your benefits. The only thing that changes is that this firm will now be run by someone who actually knows how to run a business. I'm almost to the door when Clara's voice stops me. Marcus, she says, her voice barely audible. Was this always the plan? Even from the beginning? I turn back and look at her one last time. This woman I was married to for 8 years, who I trusted with my money and my heart, who I watched build her dreams on the foundation of my bank account before she decided she didn't need the foundation anymore. No, Clara, I tell her honestly. The plan was to love you and support your dreams and grow old together. But plans change when people do stupid things. I closed the door behind me with a soft click, leaving behind the wreckage of Clara's empire and the birth of something entirely new. Outside on the street, I pull out my phone and dial my accountant. Jameson? It's Marcus. Yes, it went exactly as planned. Start the paperwork for the restructuring. And Jameson? Make sure the new letterhead reads, Hail Legal Partners. I think it has a nice ring to it. 2 weeks after I basically nuked my wife's legal empire from orbit, I find myself standing in front of a converted townhouse in Brooklyn that looks like it's been through more battles than a Civil War battlefield. The paint is peeling, the front steps are cracked, and there's a fire escape that probably violates about 17 building codes. But something about this place feels more real than all the marble and mahogany I've been dealing with lately. This is where the magic happens, apparently. Phoenix Legal Collective, a name that would make corporate lawyers laugh until they cried, but somehow fits perfectly with the scrappy energy radiating from this building like heat from a furnace. I'm here because my lawyer, Patricia Wells, mentioned something about opportunities in emerging legal markets during our post-coup celebration dinner last week. What she actually meant was, there's this crazy young lawyer in Brooklyn who's making the big firms nervous, and maybe you should check her out before someone else does. The reception area looks like it was decorated by someone who shopped exclusively at garage sales and IKEA's bargain bin. Mismatched chairs, a coffee table that's probably older than most of the staff, and walls covered with newspaper clippings about cases they've won against corporations that could buy and sell this entire building without blinking. But here's the thing about Marcus Hale. I didn't get where I am by judging books by their covers. Some of the most profitable investments I've ever made started in places that looked like they were one health inspection away from being condemned. Mr. Hale, a voice calls from across the room, and I turn to see a woman who's probably young enough to be carded at restaurants, but carries herself with the kind of confidence that usually takes decades to develop. I'm Lydia Torres. Thank you for coming. Lydia Torres looks exactly like what you'd expect from someone running a legal collective in Brooklyn. Dark hair pulled back in a ponytail that says, I don't have time for fancy styling. Jeans that have probably seen more courtrooms than some lawyers see in their entire careers, and eyes that burn with the kind of intensity you usually only find in people who've got something to prove to the world. Miss Torres, I shake her hand, noting the firm grip that doesn't try to overcompensate, but doesn't apologize for existing either. Interesting operation you've got here. She laughs, and it's the kind of genuine sound that I haven't heard in legal circles for longer than I care to admit. That's one way to put it. Come on, let me show you around before you decide whether we're brilliant visionaries or completely insane. The tour that follows is like stepping into an alternate universe where lawyers actually give a damn about something other than billable hours and partnership tracks. The office space is cramped and chaotic, with case files stacked on every available surface and whiteboards covered in strategy notes that look like they were written by someone planning a military campaign. This is our war room, Lydia says, gesturing to a conference room that's about the size of Clara's old office closet. We handle about 40 cases at any given time. Wrongful evictions, immigration rights, class action suits against landlords who think heat is optional in January. I pick up a case file from the table, Martinez versus Blackstone Property Management. A family of 5 getting evicted from their apartment because their toddler's crying supposedly violated the quiet enjoyment clause in their lease. The kind of case that big firms would settle quietly for nuisance value. Except these people are fighting it all the way to appeals court. What's your success rate? I ask, genuinely curious. Depends how you measure success, Lydia replies, leading me to another room where 3 lawyers who look like they're barely old enough to vote are huddled around a computer screen. If you mean, how often do we get our clients exactly what they're asking for? It's about 60%. If you mean, how often do we keep people from getting completely screwed over by corporations with unlimited legal budgets? It's closer to 90. We stop in front of a bulletin board covered with thank you letters, newspaper clippings, and what looks like a hand-drawn picture from a kid whose family probably didn't get evicted because of the work these people do. It's the kind of wall decoration you'd never see at Hale Legal Partners, where success is measured in billable hours and partnership distributions. Mr. Hale, Lydia says, and for the first time since I arrived, her voice gets serious. I'm going to be straight with you. We're broke. Not cash flow problems broke, or waiting for receivables broke. We're choosing between office rent and employee health insurance broke. I appreciate the honesty. In my experience, people who are willing to admit they're drowning are usually the ones worth throwing a life preserver to. How broke? I ask. We've got about 6 weeks of operating capital left, assuming nobody gets sick and the heating system doesn't completely die before spring. Our biggest corporate case just settled for a fraction of what we were hoping for, and the city cut funding for legal aid programs by 30%. She leads me to her office, which is basically a closet with a window and enough legal books to stock a small library. The desk is covered with financial statements that paint a picture of an organization that's been running on passion and coffee for longer than anyone should have to. We could take corporate clients, she continues, settling into a chair that looks like it came from a 1970s yard sale. Charge premium rates for routine contract work, maybe do some regulatory compliance for tech startups. But that's not why we got into law. Why did you get into law? I ask, because something tells me the answer is going to be refreshingly different from to make partner by 30 and buy a house in the Hamptons. Because the system is rigged, she says simply. Because corporate lawyers make more in a month than most people make in a year, while families get evicted because they can't afford legal representation. Because immigration courts have a 97% conviction rate when people represent themselves, but a 60% acquittal rate when they have competent counsel. She pulls out a folder and spreads some papers across her desk. We're not trying to get rich, Mr. Hale. We're trying to level the playing field just enough so that having money isn't the only thing that determines whether you get justice. I look at the financial projections, the case files, the thank you letters, and something clicks into place that I wasn't expecting. This isn't just another investment opportunity or another way to diversify my portfolio. This is the anti-Clara. This is what Clara's firm could have been if she'd actually cared about practicing law instead of playing lawyer for the cameras. What would you do with $10 million? I ask. Lydia's eyes widen like I just asked her what she'd do if aliens landed on the courthouse steps. 10 million? Are you serious? Dead serious. 10 million in seed funding, in exchange for 40% equity and a board seat. What would you build? She doesn't hesitate, which tells me she's been thinking about this conversation long before I walk through her door. Expand to all 5 boroughs. Hire 20 more attorneys. Create a training program for law students who want to do public interest work but can't afford to take unpaid internships. Set up a legal clinic in every neighborhood where people can get real advice instead of just forms to fill out. And change the game. Make it so that having a corporate legal team doesn't automatically mean you win. Level the playing field so that justice isn't just for people who can afford it. I pull out my checkbook. Yes, I still carry an actual checkbook because some things are too important for electronic transfers, and write out a number that makes Lydia's eyes fill with tears. $10 million. Not a loan with complicated terms and performance clauses. Not an investment with exit strategies and profit-sharing agreements. Just seed money for someone who wants to fight the good fight and actually has the balls to do it. Mr. Hale, she says, staring at the check like it might disappear if she blinks. You've just saved us. You've saved everything we're trying to build here. No, I tell her, standing up and shaking her hand again. You've saved me. I've been so busy playing corporate games that I forgot what it feels like to invest in something that actually matters. As I'm walking back to my car, I pull out my phone and dial Patricia Wells. Patricia? It's Marcus. Remember that emerging legal market opportunity you mentioned? Yeah, I just wrote them a check for $10 million. And Patricia, this isn't about revenge anymore. This is about building something real. For the first time since this whole mess started, I'm not thinking about Clara or Victor or the smoking ruins of Hale and Winters. I'm thinking about what comes next, and it feels a hell of a lot better than looking backward. 3 weeks after I basically adopted a scrappy legal collective in Brooklyn like some kind of philanthropic sugar daddy, Clara calls me with a proposal that's about as appealing as a root canal performed by a drunk dentist. She wants to meet for coffee to discuss our public narrative, which is PR speak for help me figure out how to spin this disaster so I don't look like a complete idiot. The location she picks is Cafe Orpheus, one of those aggressively neutral Upper West Side spots where divorced couples go to hash out custody agreements and failed business partners meet to divide up what's left of their dreams. It's the kind of place that serves $15 avocado toast and has enough ambient noise to cover heated conversations without making them sound like Jerry Springer episodes. I arrive exactly on time because punctuality is just another form of psychological warfare, and find Clara already sitting at a corner table with her laptop open and what looks like a legal pad covered in talking points. She's wearing a navy blue business suit that screams professional competence and makeup that's probably designed to hide the fact that she hasn't been sleeping well since her empire collapsed. "Marcus," she says as I sit down, her voice carrying that careful modulation lawyers use when they're trying to sound reasonable while asking for unreasonable things. "Thank you for coming. I know this is complicated." I order black coffee from a waitress who looks young enough to be my daughter and settle back in my chair with the kind of relaxed confidence that comes from holding all the cards in a game where your opponent is still trying to figure out what game they're playing. "So," I say, stirring cream into my coffee with the deliberate slowness of someone who has nowhere else to be and all the time in the world. "What's this about, Clara?" She slides her laptop across the table like she's presenting evidence in a murder trial. On the screen is a draft press release that's been formatted with all the professional polish of a Fortune 500 company's damage control statement. The headline reads, "Hale Legal Partners announces leadership transition." I start reading, and with every sentence, my appreciation for the creative use of the English language grows exponentially. According to this masterpiece of corporate fiction, Clara is stepping back from operational duties to focus on strategic client relationships. My acquisition of controlling interest in the firm is described as a planned transition to optimize operational efficiency. The complete absence of Victor Cross from any mention in the document is apparently because he's pursuing new opportunities in the private sector. It's like reading a fairy tale written by someone who learned creative writing from SEC filing documents. "This is interesting," I say after finishing the entire thing, which takes about 3 minutes because it's mostly buzzwords strung together with corporate nonsense. "Very creative." Clara leans forward with the kind of hopeful expression that suggests she actually thinks I might be buying what she's selling. "I worked with our communications consultant to craft something that protects everyone's reputation while explaining the transition in terms that the legal community can understand." "Our communications consultant," I repeat slowly. "You mean the same communications consultant who charged my company $20,000 to plan a launch party where you publicly divorced me?" Her face flushes slightly, but she pushes forward like a lawyer who's already committed to a bad argument. "Marcus, we both have reputations to protect. This statement allows us to move forward without unnecessary damage to either of our professional standing." I close the laptop and slide it back across the table. "Clara, this reads like something a politician would release after getting caught embezzling campaign funds. It's 90% bullshit wrapped in 10% fancy vocabulary. It's a professional statement that..." "It's a lie." I interrupt her gently but firmly. Every single sentence in that document is designed to hide the truth instead of explaining it. "You want to protect our reputations? Let's start by telling people what actually happened." She stares at me like I just suggested we take out a full-page ad in the New York Times admitting to war crimes. "You want me to tell the truth? The actual truth?" Crazy concept, I know. But yes, I want you to tell the truth. For the next 2 hours, we sit in that cafe rewriting Clara's fairy tale into something that resembles actual journalism. It's like performing surgery on a piece of creative writing, cutting away all the corporate speak and media training until what's left is raw, honest, and probably more devastating than anything I could have written myself. The first draft Clara produces is still mostly garbage, but it's garbage that's moving in the right direction. Instead of stepping back from operational duties, she writes, resigning from leadership positions. Instead of planned transition, she admits to financial restructuring following the withdrawal of major investment. But it's still not enough. "Try again," I tell her, handing back her laptop after deleting half of what she's written. "This time, pretend you're explaining it to your father. Judge Winters doesn't do corporate speak, Clara. He does facts." The mention of her father hits like a slap across the face. Judge Robert Winters is old-school judiciary, the kind of man who believes that words should mean what they say and say what they mean. He's also the kind of father who raised his daughter to believe that integrity matters more than appearances, which makes Clara's current situation especially painful. She starts typing again, and this time the words that come out are sharper, cleaner, more honest. Instead of hiding behind passive voice and corporate euphemisms, she starts taking responsibility for decisions that led to consequences. Marcus Hale provided the financial foundation that made Hale and Winters LLP possible, she writes. My personal choices jeopardized that investment and damaged the professional relationship that the firm was built on. It's getting better, but it's still not the whole truth. What about Victor? I ask. She stops typing and stares at the screen for a long moment. What about him? Are you going to mention that you were having an affair with your business partner while using your husband's money to fund both your firm and your relationship? Or are we going to pretend that's not relevant to the story? The question hangs in the air between us like smoke from a gun barrel. Clara's hands hover over the keyboard, probably running through all the different ways she could phrase this particular truth without completely destroying what's left of her professional reputation. I made personal choices that compromised my professional judgment, she finally types. Those choices led to decisions that were unfair to my investors and damaging to the firm's financial stability. It's still corporate speak, but it's corporate speak that acknowledges reality instead of trying to pretend it never happened. We spend another hour refining the language, cutting away the last bits of spin and public relations nonsense until what's left is something that might actually qualify as honest. By the time we're finished, Clara's statement reads like it was written by someone who understands the difference between accepting responsibility and managing public perception. The final version includes an acknowledgement that I funded the firm's entire operation, an admission that her personal decisions led to the firm's financial crisis, and a clear statement that she's stepping down from all leadership roles to allow for proper restructuring under new management. This is going to destroy my reputation, she says, reading through the final draft one more time. Your reputation was destroyed the moment you decided to publicly humiliate the man who bankrolled your entire operation, I tell her. This is just acknowledging what everyone already knows. She stares at the screen for another long moment, probably weighing the cost of honesty against the price of continued deception. Then, without any fanfare or dramatic speeches, she hits schedule and sets the statement to go live on the firm's website and social media accounts tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. There, she says, closing the laptop with a finality that sounds like a coffin lid slamming shut. The truth as requested. The truth as required. I correct her. This should have been your first instinct, not your last resort. As I'm getting ready to leave, Clara reaches across the table and touches my hand for just a moment. Marcus, for what it's worth, I never wanted it to end like this. I know, I tell her honestly. But wanting something and working for it are two very different things. You wanted to have your cake and eat it too. I wanted a wife who understood that marriage is supposed to be a partnership, not a business transaction. Outside the cafe, I pull out my phone and call Patricia Wells. Patricia? It's Marcus. Clara's releasing a statement tomorrow morning. Yes, it's honest. No, she's not going to like the reaction. And Patricia? Make sure our media people are ready to field calls. Tomorrow's going to be interesting. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I can already hear the phones ringing at law firms across Manhattan as the legal gossip network processes the news that Clara Winters Hale just admitted to imploding her own firm through spectacular professional misconduct. Tomorrow morning, the truth finally gets to see daylight. And after months of living in Clara's carefully constructed fantasy, that feels like a victory all by itself. You know what's funny about the truth? It spreads faster than gossip and hits harder than a freight train carrying lawsuits. Clara's statement goes live at exactly 9 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, and by 9:15, my phone is buzzing like an angry hornet's nest with calls from reporters, lawyers, and probably half the legal establishment in Manhattan who suddenly want to know everything about Marcus Hale. I'm sitting in my apartment, nursing my second cup of Colombian coffee and watching the sunrise paint Central Park in shades of gold and possibility when the first call comes in. It's from Legal Times, then Above the Law, then something called Manhattan Law Weekly that I'm pretty sure didn't exist yesterday, but apparently has very strong opinions about corporate restructuring in boutique firms. The best part? I don't answer a single one of them. Instead, I pour myself another cup of coffee and settle in to watch the digital wildfire spread across social media like spilled gasoline meeting a lit cigarette. LinkedIn explodes with hot takes from lawyers who want everyone to know they saw this coming all along. Twitter becomes a battlefield between people who think Clara got what she deserved and people who think I'm some kind of corporate monster for pulling my own money out of a business run by people who betrayed me. By noon, the story has made it to the front page of the New York Law Journal with a headline that reads, "Power Couple's Public Divorce Exposes Law Firm Financial Crisis." The article includes quotes from sources close to the situation who apparently have very detailed knowledge of my personal finances and very strong opinions about my character. But here's the thing about being Marcus Hale. When you've already won the war, watching people argue about the battle tactics is just entertainment. The real fun starts around 2 p.m. when my email inbox begins filling up with opportunities that would have seemed impossible just 6 months ago. Columbia Law School wants me to guest lecture on entrepreneurial finance in legal startups. The New York State Bar Association is asking if I'd be interested in serving on their ethics committee, which is either ironic or perfectly appropriate, depending on your perspective. 3 different nonprofit organizations want to discuss potential partnerships, and someone from the mayor's office is asking if I'd consider joining an advisory board on small business development. It's like watching your reputation get rebuilt in real time, except this time it's being built on a foundation of honesty instead of carefully managed public relations. The most interesting call comes from Dr. Eleanor Hartwell at NYU's Business School, who wants to know if I'd be willing to participate in a case study about financial accountability in professional services partnerships. Apparently, my systematic dismantling of Clara's empire is being taught as an example of how to protect investment interests when personal relationships go sideways. I'm famous, but for all the right reasons this time. Around 4 p.m., I decide to escape the chaos and take a walk through Central Park. It's one of those perfect October afternoons when the leaves are just starting to turn and the air has that crisp quality that makes you grateful to be alive in New York City. I'm walking past the Shakespeare Garden, thinking about nothing more complicated than whether to grab dinner at that Italian place I like, when my phone buzzes with a text from Patricia Wells. Victor Cross just posted on LinkedIn. You should probably see this. I find a bench and pull up Victor's profile, which now features a lengthy post that reads like a suicide note written by someone who learned creative writing from corporate legal documents. He's apparently taking time to reassess career priorities and exploring opportunities outside the traditional legal framework. It's the kind of language people use when they're unemployed but too proud to admit it. The comments section is a bloodbath of former colleagues offering hollow sympathy while probably updating their contact lists to remove his information. It's professional death by 1,000 cuts, and I'd almost feel sorry for him if he hadn't spent 2 years screwing my wife while spending my money. By the time I get home, there are 17 voicemails waiting for me, including one from Judge Robert Winters that simply says, "Marcus, call me when you get a chance. We should talk." Clara's father has always been a straight shooter, the kind of man who doesn't waste words or time on pleasantries when there's serious business to discuss. I call him back immediately, because ignoring Judge Winters is the kind of mistake that follows you around for the rest of your life. "Marcus," he answers on the first ring. I read Clara's statement. I also read the coverage in the legal press. "Are you doing okay?" It's such a simple question, but coming from him, it carries the weight of genuine concern. Judge Winters watched his daughter destroy her marriage and her career, and somehow he's asking if I'm okay. "I'm better than I've been in years, Judge," I tell him honestly. "Thank you for asking." "Good. That's good." There's a pause, and I can hear him choosing his words carefully. "Marcus, I want you to know that what Clara did, the way she handled this situation, that's not how I raised her. That's not the kind of person I thought she was. People change, Judge. Sometimes they show you who they really were all along. Maybe so, but I want you to know that you handled this with more class than most men would have shown. You could have destroyed her completely, and you didn't." After I hang up, I realize that Judge Winters is right. I could have destroyed Clara completely. I could have made sure she never practiced law again. Could have turned her into a cautionary tale that law students study for decades. Instead, I gave her a chance to rebuild, albeit on a much smaller scale, and with a much clearer understanding of how the world actually works. Maybe that makes me a better man than I thought I was. Or maybe it just makes me someone who's learned the difference between justice and revenge. That evening, I'm getting ready for dinner when my doorman calls up to announce that I have a visitor. Dr. Camille Rhodes from Columbia Law School, sir. Says she has an appointment? I don't remember scheduling any appointments, but something about the name sounds familiar. It takes me a moment to place it. She's the ethics professor who was quoted in one of the articles about Clara's statement, talking about fiduciary responsibility in professional partnerships. Dr. Camille Rhodes turns out to be a woman in her early 40s with the kind of sharp intelligence that comes through in everything from her handshake to the way she looks around my apartment like she's cataloging details for future reference. She's wearing jeans and a Columbia sweatshirt, which suggests this isn't a formal business call. Mr. Hale, she says, settling into the chair across from my couch, like she belongs there. I hope you don't mind the unscheduled visit. I was in the neighborhood, and I've been following your situation with great interest. Academic interest? I ask, pouring 2 glasses of wine because something tells me this conversation is going to require alcohol. Professional and personal, she admits. What you did to Hale and Winters, the way you structured your withdrawal, the legal mechanisms you used to protect your investment, it's brilliant. Ethically sound, legally airtight, and more elegant than anything I've seen in 20 years of studying corporate accountability. We talk for 3 hours about everything from business ethics to the future of legal education. And by the time she leaves, I realize 2 things. First, that I haven't had a conversation this intellectually stimulating since before Clara and I got married. And second, that Dr. Camille Rhodes has the kind of smile that makes you want to figure out what makes her laugh. As I'm cleaning up the wine glasses, I catch myself smiling for no particular reason except that for the first time in years, the future feels like something worth looking forward to instead of something to survive. Tomorrow, I start teaching a seminar at Columbia on entrepreneurial finance. Next week, I'm meeting with the Phoenix legal team to discuss expansion plans. And sometime soon, I might just ask Dr. Camille Rhodes if she'd like to continue our conversation over dinner. The war with Clara is over, and I won. But more importantly, I'm finally ready to start building something new. 6 months after the spectacular implosion of what used to be Clara's legal empire, I'm sitting in my new apartment on the Upper West Side, grading papers for my Columbia Law School seminar on entrepreneurial finance, when the FedEx courier shows up with a package that's about to close the final chapter of the Marcus Hale revenge story. The apartment is smaller than my old place. No marble countertops or floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, but it gets sunlight. Real, honest-to-God sunlight that streams through normal-sized windows and makes everything feel warm and alive instead of like a museum exhibit designed to impress people I never really liked anyway. The FedEx envelope is addressed in handwriting I recognize immediately, even though it's been months since I've seen Clara's distinctive cursive. No return address, but the Portland postmark tells me everything I need to know about how far she's fallen from the Manhattan legal scene she once thought she was going to conquer. I pour myself a cup of coffee, regular coffee, not the $20 a pound Colombian stuff I used to drink because expensive was supposed to mean better, and settle into the reading chair I bought from a furniture store in Queens instead of some boutique showroom where they charge extra for the privilege of being condescended to by interior designers. The letter inside is written on plain white paper, the kind you can buy at any drugstore, and it's only 1 page long. But sometimes 1 page is enough to say everything that needs saying. Marcus, asterisk. I moved to Portland 3 months ago. I know that probably doesn't surprise you. Everyone in the New York legal community knows by now that Clara Winters Hale is persona non grata east of the Hudson River, asterisk. I work at a nonprofit clinic now, helping people who can't afford lawyers navigate immigration cases and housing disputes. The pay is terrible. The office is in a strip mall between a nail salon and a tax preparation service, and I've never been happier to go to work in the morning, asterisk. I understand now what you tried to tell me that night in your apartment. I understand the difference between being respected and being famous, between building something real and building something that looks good in legal trade publications, asterisk. I spent 8 years married to a man who supported my dreams even when I didn't deserve his support, and I threw it all away because I thought I needed to prove something to people whose opinions shouldn't have mattered, asterisk. I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness or understanding or even acknowledgement that this letter exists. But I wanted you to know that I'm different now. Not better, necessarily, but different. Real, asterisk. The woman who served you divorce papers at that party was playing a character she thought she was supposed to be. The woman writing this letter is just Clara, trying to figure out how to live with the choices she made and the bridges she burned. Asterisk. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know. Asterisk. Clara asterisk. I read the letter twice, then fold it carefully and slide it into the desk drawer where I keep important documents that I'm not ready to throw away but don't need to look at every day. Next to tax returns and insurance policies and the deed to this apartment that nobody helped me pick out because I'm perfectly capable of choosing my own goddamn living space. There's no anger in me anymore when I think about Clara. No bitterness or resentment or desire for further revenge. Just a kind of distant sadness for the woman she could have been if she'd figured out who she actually was before she tried to become someone else. The irony is that the Clara who wrote this letter, the one working in a strip mall legal clinic, making terrible money to help people who actually need help, that's the woman I fell in love with 10 years ago. That's the woman I would have supported and encouraged and built a life with if she'd existed anywhere except in my memory of who she used to be. But that woman disappeared somewhere between law school graduation and the first time someone called her a rising star in Manhattan legal circles. She got replaced by someone who cared more about appearances than reality, more about being seen as successful than actually doing work that mattered. Maybe Portland will give her a chance to find her way back to who she was supposed to be. Maybe working in that strip mall clinic will teach her the difference between having a career and having a calling. Maybe she'll figure out that respect has to be earned through actions, not bought with other people's money. Or maybe she won't. Maybe this is just another performance, another carefully crafted image designed to make me think she's learned something she hasn't actually learned. I've been fooled by Clara Winters before, and the smart money says I shouldn't trust anything she says or writes or claims to believe. But here's the thing about being Marcus Hale. I don't have to figure out whether Clara's redemption arc is real or fake. That's her problem to solve, not mine. My phone buzzes with a text from Camille Rhodes, Dr. Camille Rhodes, who turned out to be exactly as brilliant and funny and genuinely interesting as she seemed that first night she showed up at my door unannounced. We've been dating for 3 months now. If you can call it dating when two middle-aged professionals grab dinner between teaching schedules and discuss constitutional law over wine like it's the most natural thing in the world. Dinner at 7? That new Ethiopian place in the village? Asterisk. I text back. Asterisk perfect. Just finished grading papers. Ready for food that doesn't come with student complaints about grade curves? Asterisk. Bring the good wine. I have news about the Phoenix legal expansion. Asterisk. The Phoenix Legal Collective has been the best investment I've made in years, and not just financially. Lydia Torres and her team have opened 3 new offices across the city, hired 47 new attorneys, and won some cases that have corporate legal departments genuinely nervous about treating poor people like they're disposable. Last month, they convinced a federal judge to certify a class action lawsuit against one of the biggest property management companies in New York, representing over 2,000 tenants who were illegally charged fees that nobody bothered to explain or justify. The settlement is going to run into 8 figures, and every penny of it goes to people who actually need the money instead of lawyers who already have too much. That's what victory looks like when you're building something instead of destroying something. When you're creating value instead of just redistributing wealth from people who trusted you to people who betrayed them. I look out my window at the street below, where normal people are living normal lives without worrying about legal empires or corporate restructuring, or whether their spouse is planning to publicly humiliate them at parties they paid for. A couple is walking hand in hand toward the subway, probably heading to jobs that don't require them to question everyone's motives or document every financial transaction like they're preparing for war. That could be me and Camille in 6 months, or a year, or whenever we figure out that what we have is worth making official. Walking to dinner without checking our phones for urgent messages from lawyers or accountants or business partners who think the world will end if they don't have immediate answers to questions that could wait until tomorrow. The sunlight is starting to fade, painting my apartment in shades of gold and amber that make everything look warm and possible. In an hour, I'll meet Camille at that Ethiopian restaurant, and we'll talk about Phoenix Legal's expansion plans and her research on legal ethics, and maybe what we're doing next weekend when neither of us has papers to grade or cases to review. Later tonight, I'll come home to this apartment that belongs entirely to me, pour myself a glass of wine that costs exactly what wine should cost, and read a book that has nothing to do with business or law or revenge or any of the things that consumed my life for the past year. Tomorrow, I'll teach eager law students about the intersection of entrepreneurship and ethics, help Lydia Torres figure out how to fund legal clinics in underserved communities, and maybe take Camille to that art gallery opening she mentioned. The war with Clara is over. The reconstruction of Marcus Hale is complete. And for the first time in longer than I care to remember, the future feels like something to build instead of something to survive. I closed the desk drawer with Clara's letter inside and walked toward the window, where the last of the afternoon sunlight is turning the city into something that looks almost like hope. The best revenge, it turns out, isn't destroying your enemies. It's building a life so good that their betrayal becomes irrelevant. And that, I realize, is the ultimate victory. For 13 years, I had given everything to my wife's father's company. My time, my energy, my ideas, and my loyalty. I had worked through weekends, missed vacations, and sacrificed sleep, all to transform the struggling firm into an empire worth $85 million. It wasn't just a business to me. It was my creation. I had built it from the ground up, turning failed ventures into strategic successes, closing deals that others deemed impossible, and making my father-in-law's name synonymous with power and prestige. Yet, as I sat at the grand dining table that evening, surrounded by family members who had no idea of the storm brewing beneath my calm exterior, I heard the words that changed everything. Your wife's new husband will take over now. The voice belonged to my wife. Her tone was smooth, practiced, like she had rehearsed saying it. Her father, seated at the head of the table, merely smiled in agreement, as if this was just another business decision, another shift in power that I should accept without question. My grip on the silverware tightened, but I forced my expression to remain neutral. I refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing my anger, my betrayal. The betrayal of a man who had dedicated his life to a cause, only to be cast aside like an employee whose contract had expired. I glanced around the table. The rest of the family was chatting, eating, oblivious to the significance of what had just been said. Or maybe they knew, but they had chosen to stay silent, unwilling to challenge the patriarch's decision. That was how it had always been. What he said was law. And I had been a fool to believe that loyalty mattered, a fool to think that years of hard work and sacrifice would make me irreplaceable, a fool to assume that my wife, the woman I had built a life with, saw me as her partner rather than a placeholder. Her new husband. I looked at her then, truly looked at her, and realized something I should have seen long ago. She had never fought for me, never stood up for me, never challenged her father's authority, even when his choices were unfair. She had simply played the role of the obedient daughter, the princess waiting for her father to arrange the best possible deal for her. And now, she had been promised to another man. Not because I had failed her, not because I was lacking, but because I was no longer useful to them. I placed my fork down gently, smoothing my napkin over my lap, maintaining the mask of control that had carried me through countless business meetings. I wouldn't react, not here, not now. They expected anger, they expected resistance, they expected me to protest like a man who didn't see the game they were playing. But I saw it now. The room filled with laughter, the clinking of glasses, the hum of conversation. And yet, to me, everything had gone silent. I had built them an empire, and they thought they could hand it over to another man while I walked away quietly. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the dim glow of my study, staring at the documents stacked neatly on my desk. Financial records, contracts, agreements, all the proof of what I had given to this company, to this family. They had underestimated me. They thought I was just the workhorse, the fool who had built their fortune while they held the reins. But they had forgotten something important. The horse they had ridden for 13 years had learned to run without a rider. And if they thought I would simply walk away from everything I had built, they were gravely mistaken. By 3 a.m., I sat alone in my home office, the glow of my laptop screen illuminating the determination on my face. Sleep had no place in my mind tonight. Adrenaline coursed through my veins as I combed through every document, every contract, every financial statement I had ever signed. The betrayal from earlier that evening still rang in my ears like a haunting echo. Your wife's new husband will take over now. Those words should have broken me. They should have shattered my resolve. But instead, they had ignited something far more powerful, an unwavering fire to take back what was mine. For 13 years, I had been methodical. While my father-in-law had played the respectable businessman and my wife had lived in luxury, I had been making moves, subtle, quiet, but undeniably strategic. I was not a fool. I had seen the way power shifted in this family, how loyalty was never a guarantee, how the only person I could ever truly trust was myself. And so, I had ensured that my control over the company was not just symbolic. It was legal, ironclad, and absolute. My fingers flew across the keyboard as I pulled up the executive shareholders agreement. The numbers stared back at me, a stark reminder of what I had orchestrated over the years. 62%. That was how much of the company I owned. Not my father-in-law. Not my wife. Not the stranger they had handpicked as my replacement. Me. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. They thought they had boxed me into a corner, but they had no idea that I had already built an escape route. They expected me to disappear quietly. Instead, I was going to remind them exactly who they were dealing with. As the clock struck 8:45 a.m., I walked into the company headquarters, not as a man who had been discarded, but as a man who was about to burn their carefully laid plans to the ground. The lobby was already bustling with employees, executives, and assistants moving between meetings. Some offered me nods of respect, others glanced at me with uncertainty. The whispers had already started. Did he hear the news? Will he step down? What's he going to do? I ignored them. I wasn't here for rumors. I was here for war. Taking the elevator to the top floor, I strode into my office, my presence alone sending a wave of tension through the space. My assistant, Danielle, looked up from her desk, her face betraying none of the chaos that must have been circling through the company grapevine. She had been with me for nearly a decade, loyal, sharp, and always 2 steps ahead. Schedule a board meeting for noon, I said, setting my briefcase down. She hesitated only for a second before nodding. Understood. Anything else? Yes, I said, my voice calm. Call the legal team. I want them ready. Her gaze flickered with understanding. The fight had begun. By the time I settled into my chair, I was already anticipating their next move. My father-in-law would waste no time. He would call in his favors, push the executives to accept the transition, frame it as a necessary shift in leadership. He would use my wife's name to solidify his argument. After all, who would question a man passing his business to his daughter and her new husband? The problem was, I wasn't just a name on a piece of paper. I was the name on the contracts that mattered. At exactly 9 a.m., as if on cue, my office door swung open without so much as a knock. My father-in-law entered first, his presence as overbearing as ever, followed by my wife, her posture poised as if this was nothing more than another meeting. And then, he walked in. The so-called new husband. Tall, young, confident, exactly the type of man my father-in-law would consider worthy of taking my place. He exuded arrogance, a smugness that came from believing he had already won. I almost laughed. I assume you're aware of the transition, my father-in-law said, his voice carrying the weight of expectation. I leaned back in my chair, steepling my fingers together. Transition? Interesting choice of words. The man beside my wife smirked, as if he found this amusing. I ignored him. He was nothing more than a placeholder, a pawn in someone else's game. My focus was on the real threat, the man who had orchestrated this betrayal in the first place. We need you to oversee the handover, my father-in-law continued. We expect full cooperation. I exhaled slowly, shaking my head. They really thought they had everything figured out. You don't have the authority to make that decision, I said, my voice eerily calm. A flicker of irritation passed over his face. My wife's expression barely shifted, but the smug look on her new husband's face faltered. I reached for the remote on my desk and pressed a button. Behind me, the massive screen on the wall lit up, displaying the executive shareholders agreement. Their eyes darted to the document. Confusion set in first, then panic. This document states that any transfer of power requires approval from the majority shareholder, I said, watching as the reality of the situation dawned on them. And that would be me. Silence. Heavy. Unmistakable. For the first time, my father-in-law's mask of composure cracked. "This is impossible," he muttered. "No," I corrected, my voice cutting through the tension. "What's impossible is thinking I would spend 13 years building something only to let you steal it from me." I turned my gaze to my wife. "Did you really think I wouldn't see this coming?" I asked her, my voice laced with disappointment. She didn't answer. Her hands tightened into fists at her sides. I let the silence stretch between us before shifting my attention to the man standing beside her, the one who had walked in thinking he was about to inherit an empire. "You have two choices," I told him. "You can work under me, or you can walk out that door and never step foot in this company again." His face turned red, his jaw clenched. He looked at my wife, then at my father-in-law. He had expected a victory lap, not a public humiliation. He stormed out without a word. My father-in-law hesitated for a fraction of a second before following. My wife lingered for a moment longer. She met my gaze, searching for something. Anger, regret, weakness. She found none. I had spent years building this empire, and if they thought they could take it from me, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. The air in my office was thick with tension long after my father-in-law and my so-called replacement had stormed out. My wife was still standing there, her hands clenched at her sides, her carefully curated mask of indifference slipping ever so slightly. She wasn't used to losing. Neither was her father. But today, they had lost. I leaned back in my chair, watching her closely. She was waiting for me to break the silence, to give her something. An explanation, an argument, a reaction. But I wasn't playing that game anymore. "You knew," she finally said, her voice quiet but edged with something sharp. "You knew all along." I tilted my head slightly, as if considering her words. What exactly did I know? Her nostrils flared. "Don't play dumb. You knew what my father was planning. You knew he was going to transition the company to—" She stopped herself before saying his name. She didn't have to. I let out a slow breath, tapping my fingers on the desk. "Of course I knew," I said smoothly. "I know how your father operates. He's predictable. He thinks power is something he can shuffle around like a deck of cards. He underestimated me, just like you did." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "This doesn't have to be a war, you know?" I laughed, the sound dry and humorless. "It already is, darling." Her gaze flickered to the massive screen behind me, still displaying the shareholder agreement, the document that had just dismantled all of their carefully laid plans. I saw the realization in her eyes, the understanding that the life she had expected, the seamless transition she had envisioned, had just gone up in flames. "So what now?" she asked. "You think you can just keep me out? That my father will accept this?" I stood up, slowly, deliberately, and rounded the desk. She stiffened slightly as I stopped right in front of her. "Let's get something straight," I said, my voice low. "Your father doesn't run this company anymore. I do. If you want to stay in this game, you'll do it on my terms." She scoffed. "You don't control me." I smiled. "No, but I control what matters. And right now, that's the future of this company. If you thought I was going to just step aside and let you and your new husband waltz in, you don't know me as well as you think." Her jaw tightened. She had always been good at masking her emotions, but I knew her too well. She was panicking. "This isn't over," she whispered, her voice carrying more desperation than confidence. "Oh, I know," I said. "It's just beginning." She turned on her heel and left, slamming the door behind her. I exhaled, rolling my shoulders back. The first battle had been won, but the war was far from over. I had thrown a wrench in their plans, but I knew my father-in-law well enough to understand that he wasn't the type to accept defeat easily. He had spent decades building his reputation, surrounding himself with people who feared him, admired him, obeyed him. I was about to become the one thing he had never accounted for, his equal, or worse for him, his superior. I pressed the intercom button on my desk. "Danielle, call a board meeting. Noon." "Understood," she replied instantly. I needed to secure my position before my father-in-law tried to rally the board against me. Money and influence could make people disloyal in a heartbeat, and I wasn't naive enough to think I didn't have enemies among the executives. I walked over to the window, looking down at the city below. I had spent over a decade building this empire, and for what? To be discarded? Replaced? Humiliated? No, not a chance. At noon, the boardroom was filled with executives. Some of them looked anxious, others neutral. A few were clearly waiting to see which way the tide would turn before choosing a side. I took my seat at the head of the table. I know many of you have heard rumors, I began, my voice steady. So let me clear them up. Yes, my father-in-law intended to replace me. No, that will not be happening. Murmurs rippled through the room. I let them speak amongst themselves for a moment before continuing. I've built this company into what it is today. Every deal, every expansion, every strategic move, I've been at the center of it. And I won't allow a man who hasn't spent a single day working here to walk in and take what I built. One of the executives, a man I had always respected, cleared his throat. Your father-in-law has significant influence. He could make things difficult. I met his gaze head-on. Perhaps. But let me make one thing clear. If anyone in this room believes that backing him is the right move, speak now. Silence. Heavy, deafening silence. Good. Loyalty matters, I continued, my tone softer but no less firm. And those who stand with me now will be rewarded. Those who don't? Well, you should know me well enough to understand that I don't forget disloyalty. I let my words settle. This was a game of power, and I had just made my position clear. By the time the meeting ended, I had secured the support I needed. My father-in-law could try to fight me, but he was about to learn something important. I wasn't the man he thought he could control. By the time I returned to my office, Danielle was waiting at the door. Your father-in-law called, she said. He wants to meet. I smiled. Of course he did. Tell him I'll see him tomorrow, I said. At my convenience. As she walked away, I sat back in my chair, exhaling slowly. The battle lines had been drawn, and I had no intention of losing. By the time I stepped into my office the next morning, the weight of what had happened over the last 24 hours was still sinking in. My father-in-law had miscalculated, badly. He had spent years believing he could manipulate, control, and discard me like a piece on his chessboard. He hadn't accounted for the fact that I wasn't just another pawn. I was the one who had built the kingdom, and now, I was the one who held the power to burn it down. My phone buzzed on the desk. I glanced at the screen. Unknown number. I knew exactly who it was before I even picked up. Speak. A familiar voice crackled through the line. You think you've won? I smirked, leaning back in my chair. I know I have. A slow, measured exhale came from the other end. You've made a mistake, son. A mistake that's going to cost you everything. That's funny, I said, twirling a pin between my fingers. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like the only mistake was thinking you could take what's mine. Silence. I let it stretch between us, savoring the shift in dynamic. For years, my father-in-law had spoken to me with authority, with the certainty that I would always fall in line. Today, for the first time, that authority was gone. We should meet, he finally said, his voice tight. We should, I agreed. But on my terms. My office. 1 hour. I hung up before he could argue. I wasn't going to let him control the setting, the tone, or the circumstances. If he wanted a discussion, it would be on my turf, under my rules. The next 60 minutes passed in strategic preparation. I had Danielle pull up every document, every financial report, and every legal agreement that mattered. I wanted them printed and stacked neatly on my desk, not because I needed to review them, but because I wanted him to see them, to understand that I wasn't just prepared. I was untouchable. At exactly 10 o'clock, the door to my office swung open. My father-in-law walked in, his presence as imposing as ever, dressed in his usual crisp suit. He was followed closely by my wife, ex-wife, really, though she hadn't realized it yet, and trailing behind her, the man they had chosen to replace me. I ignored him entirely. He wasn't important enough to acknowledge. Instead, I leaned back in my chair and gestured to the seats across from me. Sit. They did. Reluctantly. You think you can just lock me out of my own company? My father-in-law's voice was sharp, laced with barely concealed fury. I smiled. I don't think. I know. I tapped the stack of papers on my desk. 62%, remember? That's my share. Which means I make the decisions now. Not you. Not her. I nodded toward my wife, whose expression remained unreadable. And definitely not him. Her so-called new husband shifted in his seat, uncomfortable. This is a family business, my father-in-law pushed. And you're no longer family. I tilted my head. Funny. You had no problem with me being family when I was the one securing multi-million-dollar contracts, expanding the business, and cleaning up your financial messes. His jaw clenched. I continued. You're right about one thing, though. This is a family business. But see, I was smart enough to make sure that blood ties don't equal ownership. I slid a document across the desk. This is the revised executive structure I filed this morning, I said casually. Effective immediately, your title as chairman is revoked. Your board privileges are suspended. Your access to financial accounts? Gone. You no longer hold a single voting right in this company. My father-in-law's face turned red. You can't do that. I raised an eyebrow. I already did. My wife, ex-wife, leaned forward, her voice softer but no less sharp. Why are you doing this? I turned my gaze to her, finally giving her my full attention. Why? I repeated. You really have to ask? She didn't flinch, but I saw the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. You stood by while your father plotted to erase me, I said, my voice steady. You let him decide that I was disposable. You sat there at dinner, smiling, while he handed my legacy to someone else like I was nothing more than an employee who had overstayed his welcome. I didn't. You did. I cut her off. And now, you get to watch as everything you thought was yours slips through your fingers. Silence. The man beside her, her new husband, was visibly uncomfortable. He had come here expecting a smooth transition, a welcoming handoff. Instead, he was sitting in the room with the man he had tried to replace, realizing just how out of his depth he truly was. I turned back to my father-in-law. You built this company, but I made it an empire. And now? Now, I own the empire. I stood up, buttoning my suit jacket. I suggest you start making peace with that. For the first time in his life, my father-in-law looked at me not with control, not with arrogance, but with something close to fear. He had underestimated me, and now he was paying the price. He stood abruptly, shoving his chair back. You'll regret this. I smiled. No, you will. He turned and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. My wife hesitated. For a brief moment, I saw something in her eyes. Maybe regret, maybe realization, but it didn't matter anymore. She had made her choice, and I had made mine. She turned without another word and followed her father out. I finally turned to the man who had been left behind, the one they had planned to install in my place. He swallowed hard. Look, man, I cut him off with a single glance. Get out. He scrambled to his feet and all but ran out of my office. As the door closed behind him, I exhaled slowly, letting the silence settle. The battle wasn't over yet. But today, I had one. And I wasn't done winning. The morning after the confrontation, the weight of my victory still lingered in the air, thick and undeniable. But I knew better than to celebrate too soon. My father-in-law wasn't the type to bow out quietly. No, he would retreat, regroup, and come back swinging. He had spent decades building his power, surrounding himself with men who owed him favors, men who would gladly stab me in the back if it meant securing their own positions. Which was why I had to move first. I arrived at the office earlier than usual, stepping into the sleek glass tower that bore my legacy. The employees who had once greeted me with polite smiles now looked at me with something different, hesitation, uncertainty. The whispers were growing louder. The company had become a battlefield overnight, and everyone was waiting to see which side would come out on top. Danielle was already waiting in my office when I walked in, her hands resting on a thick stack of files. She had worked with me long enough to know that I wouldn't be resting after yesterday's events. They're rallying, she said without preamble. I didn't need to ask who they were. How many? I asked, taking off my jacket and draping it over the chair. 5 board members met with your father-in-law late last night. 3 more were contacted this morning. He's offering them incentives, bonuses, future positions, anything to convince them to vote against you in the next emergency board meeting. I smirked, shaking my head. Predictable. He's desperate, I mused, taking a seat and glancing over the documents she had prepared. Desperate men can be dangerous, she warned. She was right. My father-in-law was many things, but he was never a man who accepted defeat easily. If he couldn't beat me fairly, he'd try to do it by force, by twisting the narrative, by making me look unstable or incapable, which meant I had to make my next move loud enough that no one dared challenge me again. I flipped open one of the files, scanning the contents. It was a detailed audit of the company's financials, one my father-in-law never expected anyone to see. You went digging, I said, lifting an eyebrow at Danielle. You pay me to be thorough, she responded with a shrug. I leaned back, taking my time to absorb the numbers in front of me. Hidden losses, mismanaged funds, embezzlement disguised as business expenses. My father-in-law wasn't just trying to push me out. He was trying to cover his own tracks. I exhaled slowly, tapping my fingers against the desk. How much does the board know? Nothing. He's kept it buried well. And if we release this? Danielle hesitated for a fraction of a second. It would destroy him. I nodded, my mind already working through the angles. Schedule a board meeting, I said. For when? Today. Her eyes flickered with understanding. No hesitation. No second-guessing. I'll make the calls. The battle lines had been drawn, and today, I was going to end it. By noon, the boardroom was filled with executives, each of them wearing carefully guarded expressions. They knew something was coming. My father-in-law was already seated at the far end of the table, his posture stiff, his eyes locked onto me the moment I entered. I didn't look away. I took my seat at the head of the table, allowing the silence to stretch just long enough to make them uncomfortable. I called this meeting for one reason, I said finally, my voice even, to discuss the future of this company. A few of the board members exchanged glances. My father-in-law leaned forward, his fingers interlaced. The future is already being decided, he said smoothly. The question is whether you'll accept it or fight it. I smiled, tilting my head slightly. Oh, I'm not fighting it. I'm shaping it. I reached into the folder in front of me, pulled out a thick stack of documents, and slid them across the table. These are the company's financial records, I announced, watching as the executives leaned in, specifically records of mismanaged funds, hidden debts, and unauthorized transactions. The reaction was immediate. Murmurs rippled through the room, eyes darting toward my father-in-law. This is nonsense, he snapped. Is it? I challenged, flipping to a specific page and turning the document toward him. Because this right here? This is a record of $14 million funneled into offshore accounts under your name. The room fell silent. One of the board members, a man who had always been one of my father-in-law's closest allies, cleared his throat. Is this true? My father-in-law's expression barely flickered, but I saw the tension in his shoulders. He was cornered, and he knew it. This is a private family matter, he said, his voice quieter now. No, I corrected, my tone sharp. This is a corporate matter. And as the majority shareholder, I have a duty to protect this company from corruption. More murmurs. The tide was shifting. I leaned forward, driving my point home. You wanted to take everything from me. Instead, you just handed me everything I need to take you down. A long pause. Then, finally, my father-in-law exhaled slowly, his gaze meeting mine. For the first time, he looked truly defeated. What do you want? He asked. Your resignation, I said without hesitation. Effective immediately. More silence. Then, to my surprise, he nodded. Fine. A quiet gasp from one of the board members. Even my wife, ex-wife, looked startled. And the shares, I added. Transfer them to me. My father-in-law clenched his jaw. You're pushing it. No, I said simply. I'm ending it. A long pause. Then, finally, he sighed, pushing the documents back toward me. "You really are ruthless," he muttered. I smirked. "I learned from the best." And just like that, it was over. My father-in-law left the company that day. My wife didn't follow him, not immediately. She lingered, watching me, but I didn't spare her a second glance. I had one, and nothing would ever be the same again. By the next morning, the entire city knew what had happened. The headlines splashed across business news outlets were as brutal as they were satisfying. Corporate power shift, the end of an era at Hastings Enterprises. Chairman resigns amidst financial misconduct allegations. Hastings' empire crumbles, the rise of its true architect. I sat in my office, sipping my morning coffee, reading through each article with a quiet satisfaction. The war was over. The battlefield was mine. My father-in-law had been forced into resignation, stripped of the company he had once commanded. His shares, once a symbol of his iron grip, were now in my name. And the best part? He hadn't even tried to fight back, because he knew he had lost. Danielle entered without knocking, holding a tablet. "You made every front page. Some say you're a genius. Others are calling you ruthless." I smirked. "Both are true." She set the tablet down and gave me a pointed look. "You should know something. Your ex-wife has been calling. Repeatedly." I didn't react. I had been expecting that. "Let her call." Danielle hesitated. She also came by the building earlier. Security turned her away. I exhaled slowly. She's not used to being ignored. "Clearly," Danielle muttered, before shaking her head. "One more thing, you're getting interview requests. Bloomberg, Forbes, even a few international networks. Everyone wants a comment." I chuckled. "They want to know how I managed to dismantle a legacy in under a week?" "Something like that." I leaned back in my chair, considering. The truth was, I had no interest in feeding the media frenzy. Let them speculate. Let them build their narratives about power, betrayal, and corporate warfare. The only thing that mattered was control, and I had secured it. "Decline all of them," I said. Danielle raised an eyebrow, but didn't argue. She knew me well enough to understand that I didn't do anything for public approval. "And my schedule for today?" I asked. "You have a meeting with the new board at 2 p.m., she said. "They're eager to know what direction you want to take the company in now that it's fully yours." I nodded. "Good. Make sure all financial reports are on my desk before then. I want to go in with every number at my fingertips." Danielle turned to leave, but paused at the door. "And about your ex-wife?" I didn't look up from my coffee. She made her choice. She can live with it. Danielle nodded and left. For a moment, I allowed myself to lean back and close my eyes. The past few days had been an all-out war, but I had emerged exactly where I needed to be, at the top. And I wasn't about to let anyone drag me back down. By noon, I received another call from her. I ignored it. By 12:30, a message came through. "We need to talk." I smirked at the simplicity of it, as if a few words could undo everything. By 1 o'clock, she sent another. "Please." That one made me pause. Not because I felt anything for her. I didn't. That part of me had been erased the moment she sat at that dinner table and let her father dictate my replacement. No, I paused because I recognized desperation when I saw it. And desperate people were unpredictable. By 1:45, I arrived at the boardroom. Executives were already seated, their postures stiff, their eyes watchful. They had spent years under my father-in-law's rule, conditioned to follow his lead. Now, they were looking at me, unsure of what to expect. I let the silence stretch as I took my seat at the head of the table. "Let's not waste time," I said, steepling my fingers. "I know there are concerns. I know some of you were aligned with my predecessor. But let me make one thing clear. This company doesn't run on loyalty to a name. It runs on results." A few of them shifted in their seats. "We're not going to waste time mourning the past," I continued. "We're going to move forward. And those who are ready to do that, you'll be rewarded." The tension in the room eased slightly. These were business-minded people. They didn't care about sentiment, they cared about profit. And if I could make them more money than my father-in-law ever did, they would fall in line. I spent the next hour laying out my strategy, expanding global operations, restructuring inefficient departments, securing new international partnerships. By the time the meeting ended, the board was no longer uncertain. They were intrigued, and I had them exactly where I wanted them. That night, as I was leaving the office, I saw her. She was waiting in the lobby, standing near the entrance in a fitted gray dress, looking as polished as ever. I could have walked past her. I could have ignored her completely, but a part of me wanted to hear what she had to say, if only to watch her scramble for an explanation. So I stopped. She looked up, relief flashing across her face. "You finally decided to see me." "No," I said simply. "I just didn't feel like pretending you don't exist." She flinched slightly, but recovered quickly. "Can we talk? In private?" I studied her for a long moment. Then, without a word, I turned and walked toward the side exit. I knew she would follow. Outside, the night air was crisp, the city lights reflecting in the glass windows of the building I now fully controlled. She wrapped her arms around herself, hesitating. "I didn't want this," she finally said. I laughed, shaking my head. "You stood by and watched it happen." She stopped herself, frustration flickering in her eyes. "I didn't know how to stop it." "You didn't try," I said coldly. Silence stretched between us. "I made a mistake," she admitted finally. I nodded, shoving my hands in my pockets. "Yes, you did." Her lips parted slightly, as if she had been expecting a different response. She exhaled. "I just want to know if there's any way to fix this." I looked at her then, really looked at her. She had been the woman I once trusted, once believed in, and now she was just another person who had underestimated me. "No," I said, my voice even. "You don't get to fix this. You don't get to rewrite the ending." Her eyes flashed with something. Anger, regret, maybe even grief. But none of it mattered. I turned and walked away, because some things weren't meant to be salvaged. And she had made her choice. As I walked away from her, I didn't look back. There was no need. Whatever desperation she was feeling now, whatever regret had crept into her heart, it was too little, too late. She had watched me be discarded like an afterthought, had stood silent as her father tried to erase me from my own empire. And now, she wanted to fix things? There was nothing left to fix. I stepped into my car, exhaling slowly as I gripped the steering wheel. My phone vibrated in my pocket, and I already knew who it was before I even glanced at the screen. Another message from her. "Please, just one conversation." I didn't bother responding. Instead, I turned off my notifications and pulled out of the parking lot. There was work to be done, a company to run, a future to secure. The past could keep calling, keep begging, but I was done answering. By the time I got home, my body was exhausted, but my mind was sharp. I poured myself a drink, stepping onto the balcony of my penthouse. The city sprawled before me, alive and endless, glittering under the night sky. I had won. Everything they had tried to take from me, I had taken back, and more. The company was mine now, fully mine, and for the first time in years, I didn't have to answer to anyone. No father-in-law dictating my future. No wife standing in the shadows, complicit in my downfall. So why did I feel this quiet, lingering sense of anticipation? Because I knew the game wasn't over yet. People like my father-in-law didn't just walk away. They regrouped. They retaliated. And I was ready for it. The next morning, I was back in my office before the sun had even fully risen. Danielle was already there, as always, her efficiency unmatched. She slid a file onto my desk before I had even taken my seat. "You were right," she said simply. I flipped open the file and scanned the contents. A meeting had taken place last night. My father-in-law, a few of his old allies, a handful of investors who had benefited from his reign. "They're looking for a way back in," Danielle continued, "trying to gather support, frame you as reckless, unstable." I smirked, setting the file down. "They're desperate. Desperate men do dangerous things." She wasn't wrong. "Do we have leverage on any of the investors?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Danielle nodded, flipping to another page in the file. 3 of them have questionable financial histories. Offshore accounts, unreported earnings, some borderline legal dealings. If they push too hard, we can squeeze them. And the rest? 2 of them are just waiting to see who comes out on top. They don't care who runs the company. As long as their money keeps growing, then we make sure they know where the real power is. I picked up my phone and dialed the number of the most influential investor on that list. A man who had built his fortune on the backs of others, who had never truly cared about loyalty, only profit. He answered on the second ring. I was expecting your call. Then you already know why I'm calling, I said smoothly. He chuckled. Your father-in-law has been very persuasive. He thinks you're too aggressive, too impulsive. He's making a case that the company is better off under someone calmer. And what do you think? I asked. A pause. Then, I think I like making money. And right now, you're the one making it. I smiled. Glad we understand each other. He chuckled again. For now. But power shifts quickly in this world. Be careful, son. I always am. I hung up and turned to Danielle. That's one secured. Now let's deal with the others. By noon, I had locked in the majority of the key investors. They were staying with me, at least for now. That left my father-in-law with fewer allies, fewer options, and fewer chances to claw his way back. At exactly 3 p.m., my office phone rang. I picked it up without hesitation. I was wondering when you'd call. You're making a mistake. My father-in-law's voice came through, calm but firm. You keep saying that, but I'm still here. And you? You're not. A pause. Then, this isn't over. I smirked, leaning back in my chair. It is for you. Silence. Enjoy your retirement, I said, then hung up. I exhaled, setting the phone down. Game over. That night, I returned home and found another message waiting. From her. I miss you. I stared at the words for a long moment, then deleted the message without responding. She had chosen her side, and I had one. I stepped out onto my balcony, the city stretching before me. For the first time in years, I was exactly where I was meant to be. Untouchable, unstoppable, and finally, free. By the next morning, the dust had settled, but the game wasn't over. Power struggles never truly ended. They just shifted, reshaped themselves into new battles, new challenges. The difference now? I was the one holding the sword. I arrived at the office before sunrise, the city still waking up as I stepped into the towering glass building that bore my legacy. Employees were moving through the halls, whispering, stealing glances my way. They weren't used to this version of me, the man who had once worked silently in the background, now the man in charge. Danielle was waiting in my office, already scanning through her tablet. She barely glanced up as she spoke. Your ex-wife was seen leaving her father's house late last night. Sources say she's distancing herself from him. I smirked. Of course she is. She sees the writing on the wall. Danielle finally looked up, giving me a pointed look. You think she's doing this for you? I let out a short laugh, shaking my head. No, she's doing it for herself. Because that's who she was. She had spent years aligning herself with power, making sure she was always on the winning side. Now that her father had been cast out, she was looking for a way to reclaim her position. What do you want to do about it? Danielle asked. I leaned back, considering. Nothing. Let her flail. Let her wonder if I'll let her back in. Let her feel what I felt the moment she betrayed me. Danielle nodded, not arguing. She knew better than anyone. I didn't act out of emotion. I acted out of strategy. What else? I asked, shifting my focus back to business. The remaining board members are aligned with you, at least for now. The investors who were on the fence have backed down. But there's still one problem. I arched an eyebrow. And that is? She slid a document onto my desk. Your father-in-law still has influence. He may not have ownership, but he has connections. If he wants to make things difficult for you, he can. I glanced over the document. It detailed his remaining assets, his political ties, his ability to manipulate certain markets. He's not done fighting, I mused. No, Danielle agreed. He's just waiting for an opening. I exhaled slowly, tapping my fingers against the desk. Then I won't give him one. Schedule a meeting with the board, I said. I want everything airtight before he makes his next move. Already on it, she said, stepping out of the office. I turned my chair toward the window, gazing out over the city. This was the part no one ever talked about, what happened after you won. People assumed victory was the end, but it never was. Power had to be maintained. defended, strengthened, and I wasn't about to let anyone take it from me again. By noon, the boardroom was packed. The atmosphere was different now. No more uncertainty, no more divided loyalties. They all knew where the power lay. "We're going to discuss expansion," I said, scanning the room. "Hastings Enterprises is no longer just a domestic firm. We're taking it global." A few surprised glances. Some nodded, already considering the implications. "We've relied too long on old strategies," I continued. "We were reactive. Now, we're going to be proactive. New markets, new investments. We don't sit back and wait for opportunities. We create them." An executive shifted in his seat. "That's going to require aggressive funding." I smiled. "I'm aware." Danielle slid another document across the table. "We've already begun securing private capital. Within the next 3 months, we'll have the liquidity needed to make our first international acquisition." Murmurs of approval. My father-in-law had spent years treating this company like his personal kingdom, using it to consolidate power rather than actually grow it. That was his biggest mistake. He played defense. I wasn't going to. I was going to conquer. That night, as I was leaving the office, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I already knew who it was. I answered, bringing the phone to my ear without speaking. A slow exhale on the other end. "You've made your point." I smirked. "Have I?" A pause. Then, "You think you've won. You think this is over." "It is over," I said, stepping into my car. "You just don't want to accept it. You're playing a dangerous game, son." "I'm not playing anymore." "You are. And you lost." Silence. "Retire," I continued. "Enjoy what's left of your influence before it disappears completely. Because if you come at me again, I won't just take your company. I'll take your legacy." A long pause. Then, finally, "You really are ruthless." "You taught me well," I said before hanging up. I set my phone down, exhaling. That was the last time my father-in-law ever tried to challenge me. 3 months later, Hastings Enterprises secured its first international acquisition, expanding into European markets. The numbers skyrocketed. I watched from my office window as the stock price climbed, the city lights reflecting in the glass. I had won. Not just the battle, the war. And no one would ever take this from me again. That night, I got another text. From her. "I still love you." I stared at the message for a long moment before typing back. "I don't." And with that, I blocked her number. Because power isn't just about winning. It's about knowing when to walk away. And I was never looking back. The city never truly slept, and neither did power. While the rest of the world moved through their routines, I was already steps ahead, calculating my next move. Power wasn't just about holding on, it was about expanding. And if my father-in-law had spent decades defending his empire, I was going to spend the next decade building mine bigger than he ever imagined. The office was quieter than usual when I arrived the next morning, my footsteps echoing in the executive hallway. Hastings Enterprises had already begun its global expansion, and the first phase of international acquisitions was locked in. But there was still work to do. Danielle was waiting for me, as always, a fresh folder in her hands. "Numbers from our latest acquisition," she said, handing it over. I flipped it open, scanning the reports. The company we had just acquired was already proving to be a gold mine. Revenue up 17% in the first quarter, with even higher projections for the next fiscal year. "This is good," I said, nodding. "It's more than good," she corrected. "It's a statement. The market knows you're not just holding ground, you're growing." That was exactly the point. My father-in-law had spent years playing safe, keeping the company in familiar territory. But power wasn't about safety, it was about dominance. "Any pushback?" I asked. "Not from the board," she said. "But your ex-wife has been making calls." I didn't react. To who? Some of the investors. A few of the remaining executives who were loyal to her father. I exhaled slowly, tapping my fingers against my desk. "She's looking for a way back in," Danielle continued, "trying to leverage whatever influence she has left." And how are they responding? So far, they're ignoring her. But if she keeps pushing, someone might listen. That was the problem with people like her. They never accepted when they had lost. She had aligned herself with power her entire life, always making sure she was on the winning side. And now, for the first time, she was powerless. Let her try, I said finally. It won't change anything. Danielle hesitated. She also showed up at the building again this morning. Security turned her away. I chuckled, shaking my head. She's getting desperate, Danielle noted. Let her be, I said simply. Danielle studied me for a moment, then nodded. She didn't need to say it, but I could hear the unspoken words in her silence. This isn't over. And maybe, in her mind, it wasn't. But for me, it had been over the moment she let me be erased. By mid-afternoon, I was on a conference call with a potential partner in Dubai, discussing another major acquisition. We were expanding fast, and the world was paying attention. Your reputation precedes you, the man on the other end of the call said. The way you handled your transition of power was ruthless. I smiled slightly. Business isn't personal. Oh, but it is, he chuckled. Every move you make tells the world who you are. And right now, the world is watching. I knew that. I welcomed it. By the time the call ended, I had secured another partnership, and Hastings Enterprises was another step closer to becoming a global powerhouse. I had built an empire that no one, not my ex-wife, not her father, not their failed schemes, could take from me. And that was only the beginning. That evening, I stepped into my penthouse, the city lights stretching endlessly beyond the glass walls. A drink in my hand. My phone vibrated once more. Another message. From her. I should have ignored it. But something in me wanted to see what she had to say. I opened it. I just want to talk. One last time. I exhaled, setting my drink down. I didn't owe her anything, but I wanted to see what her last move would be. So, against my better judgment, I sent a single response. Tomorrow. Noon. My office. The next day, at exactly noon, she walked into my office. She was still as polished as ever, still carried herself with the same effortless confidence. But there was something different now. A hesitation in her step, a flicker of doubt in her eyes. She took a seat across from me, crossing her legs carefully. You look good, she said after a moment. I didn't respond. I just studied her. She sighed. I don't know how to start this conversation. Then don't. Her jaw tightened slightly, but she forced a small smile. I made a mistake. You made a choice, I corrected. And it was the wrong one, she admitted. I tilted my head slightly. Didn't seem wrong when you sat across from me at that dinner table, letting your father replace me like an employee past his expiration date. She flinched at that. Good. I was stupid, she said, her voice quieter. I let my father control everything. I let him make the decisions, thinking it was what was best for me. But I see now. She swallowed. I see that I lost the one thing that actually mattered. I leaned back, watching her. And what was that? I asked, my voice unreadable. She hesitated. You. I laughed. I didn't even mean to. It just came out. You didn't lose me, I said, shaking my head. You threw me away. There's a difference. Her eyes flickered with emotion. Do you really hate me that much? I exhaled slowly. No, I don't hate you. I just don't care anymore. She stared at me for a long moment, and I saw the realization dawn in her eyes. This wasn't a game she could win. Not this time. You wanted to talk, I said, standing up. Now we've talked. I have work to do. She rose to her feet, looking like she wanted to say more. But in the end, she didn't. She just nodded once, turned, and walked out of my office. And this time, I knew she wouldn't come back. As the door shut behind her, I exhaled. Not because I felt relief. Not because I felt anger. Because, for the first time in a long time, I felt absolutely nothing. And that meant I had truly won. The door clicked shut behind her, and for the first time since this war began, I felt nothing. No rage, no regret, no satisfaction. Just a cold, quiet finality. It was over. She had walked out of my life the moment she let her father erase me. And today, I had returned the favor. I turned back to my desk, my fingers grazing the sleek surface as I exhaled. There were no more distractions, no more betrayals to uncover, no more battles left to fight. I had one. And yet, The city outside my office window kept moving, untouched by the war I had waged and won. The world didn't stop for victory. Neither could I. My phone buzzed. Danielle's voice came through the speaker. The reporters are still requesting an interview. They want to know your official statement now that everything is settled. I smirked, shaking my head. Let them speculate. I didn't owe anyone an explanation. Understood, she said. A pause. By the way, your ex-wife just left the building. I know. She looked different. Not as sure of herself. She'll adjust, I said simply. Danielle didn't press further. She never did. She understood me better than most. One more thing, she said. Your father-in-law has officially stepped down from all his remaining positions. He's off every board, out of every financial circle. The investors have cut ties. He's irrelevant now. I nodded. Good. That was the final piece. The last loose thread. He had spent decades ruling from behind a desk, controlling people like pieces on a chessboard. He had built a name, a reputation, a legacy. And now, he was just another forgotten businessman. Poetic. There's one last issue, Danielle said carefully. His lawyers reached out. He's requesting a meeting. I exhaled. Of course he is. He wouldn't go down without trying to salvage something. Some piece of his power, some remnant of his former life. Set it up, I said. My office. Tomorrow. Are you sure? I want to see the look on his face when he realizes there's nothing left for him to take. Danielle didn't argue. Tomorrow. 10 a.m., she confirmed. I hung up, staring out at the city. Tomorrow, I would bury the past for good. The final meeting. At exactly 10 a.m., my office door swung open. My father-in-law walked in, but he wasn't the same man he had been months ago. Gone was the confidence, the arrogance, the quiet certainty that he was always in control. He looked old, small, defeated. He took a seat without waiting for permission, but there was no power in the gesture. I won't waste time, he said, his voice rougher than before. I know what you think of me. I know you believe this is over. I didn't respond. I just watched him. But you don't understand something, he continued, leaning forward slightly. Power never truly disappears. It shifts. Today, you have it. But tomorrow? It could be someone else. I smiled slightly. Is that a warning? It's a lesson, he said, one I had to learn the hard way. One day, someone younger, smarter, and hungrier than you will come for what you built. And if you're not careful, you'll be sitting in this chair, having this conversation. I studied him. He wasn't wrong. Power was never permanent. It had to be defended, strengthened, reinvented. But I wasn't him. I hadn't built my empire on family loyalty or empty favors. I had built it on strategy, control, and absolute leverage. I appreciate the advice, I said smoothly, but I'm not you, and I won't make your mistakes. He exhaled, shaking his head. We'll see. Silence stretched between us. Why are you here? I asked. I want one thing, he said finally, a seat at the table. I laughed, shaking my head. You had a seat. You lost it. I built this company. And I built it into something bigger than you ever could, I countered. This isn't your legacy anymore. It's mine. His jaw tightened. Then at least let me buy back in, he pushed. Name your price. There is no price. A flicker of something crossed his face. Frustration. Maybe even desperation. You're shutting me out completely? You shut yourself out, I said simply. You made a choice. Now, you live with it. His hands curled into fists on the desk, but there was nothing left for him to fight. You'll regret this, he muttered. No, I said. You will. He stood abruptly, shoving his chair back. I hope you enjoy this power while it lasts, he said. Because one day, you'll look around and realize you're alone. I met his gaze without flinching. Alone is better than betrayed, I said. He hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out. And just like that, the war was truly over. The legacy they couldn't steal. That evening, I sat in my office, the city stretching before me. Everything had changed. The company was mine, the empire was secured, and the people who had tried to take it from me were gone. I had built something no one could steal. Not my ex-wife. Not her father. Not anyone. And now? Now, I wasn't just defending my power. I was expanding it. A knock at the door. Danielle stepped in, her expression unreadable. You did it. Of course I did. She nodded, then hesitated. So what now? I smirked, leaning back in my chair.
Now?
I echoed. Now, I make sure no one ever forgets who built this empire. She studied me for a moment, then smiled slightly. I never doubted you. As she left, I turned back to the city. They tried to erase me. They tried to replace me. They failed. Because Hastings Enterprises wasn't just a business anymore. It was my legacy. And I would make sure no one ever took it from me again.